Creatine is not what you think it is. Today, we're going to be clearing up a lot of the misconceptions behind creatine. We're also going to be talking about some of the real benefits that you get once it is absorbed in your body. And then also, we'll talk about how to take it and some other things like that. First, we really need to talk about what creatine really is. So it's a naturally occurring compound that you can find within your own body, but also in different foods such as seafood and red meats. You need to eat around about 2 to 2.5 pounds of lean ground beef to achieve 5 full grams of creatine. And that also happens to be the recommended daily dose. Creatine is also produced naturally within the body using amino acids such as methylene, glycine, and arginine that is produced in the liver and kidney, but they can only produce around 1 gram per day as well. So supplementing it in larger amounts than your body can produce it can provide great benefits. If you do choose to supplement, go with creatine monohydrate. It's the most researched form of creatine. It has over 1,000 human studies on it. And if you think about going with other forms such as creatine HCl or ethyl ester, I personally wouldn't. They're more expensive, and there's no definitive research that says that they're actually better than creatine monohydrate. Most of the creatine that you ingest is going to be stored subcutaneously, which means inside of your muscle bellies. The other about 10% is stored inside of your brain as phosphocreatine. People who think creatine is going to cause hair loss, there are studies that show that creatine can help increase DHT, which is dihydrotestosterone, which is a androgenic agent in male pattern baldness, but the studies show that it does not increase DHT enough to cause any significant actual hair loss. For people who are worried about their kidneys while taking creatine, what a lot of doctors look for is this metric of creatinine levels in the kidney. Whenever these see high creatinine levels, they think it is a bad thing because it can indicate a lot of kidney issues. But if you supplement with creatine, your creatinine levels are naturally going to be higher. So if your doctor has any kidney tests for you, make sure that you let them know that you are supplementing with creatine, and that's why your creatinine levels will be naturally higher. Higher creatinine levels do not mean kidney issues. Higher creatinine levels without creatine supplementation mean possible kidney issues. People who worry about creatine absolutely dehydrating you, that is a genuine concern. Creatine is a water-soluble compound, meaning it takes water and it transports it to the muscle subcutaneously, like we talked about, inside the muscle belly. So it is extremely important to make sure whenever you are supplementing with creatine to have adequate amount of water intake throughout the day. Creatine is not an anabolic compound. It can help with ATP production and nutrient absorption. Therefore, there is no reason to cycle off creatine ever. Some people taking creatine could be hyper responders. For example, since creatine is found a lot in red meat, a vegetarian supplementing with creatine would be a hyper responder to that supplement. Another thing is there is no such thing as men and women's creatine. There is no need for any other compounds to be introduced with creatine to make it more suitable for men and women. Creatine monohydrate is the most researched, most studied, most effective, and cheapest form of creatine that is effective in equal proportion to both men and women. Now getting into the science of what creatine actually does within the body. Some of the greatest benefits that it can provide is increased ATP production. ATP is one of the major energy drivers in your body. Whenever you're working out and performing muscle contractions, you're obviously consuming a whole lot of energy, or ATP, which is adenosine tri-3-triphosphate. Whenever you perform this and use up ATP within the muscle bellies, it gets converted into ADP, or adenosine di-2-phosphate. So it loses a energy-bound phosphate during that process. This is where creatine, which is, remember, eventually converted into phosphocreatine inside the body, comes to save the day. Creatine phosphate, or phosphocreatine, donates its phosphate to ADP to increase natural ATP, or energy production. During this process, a compound called creatine kinase, or an enzyme in this process helps with the conversion of the actual adenosine diphosphate back into ATP or adenosine triphosphate. Plenty of studies showing huge impact with regards to athletes and people who go to work out in the gym with regards to performance during their exercises. Some studies have shown up to a 15% increase just by introducing the supplementation of 5 grams of creatine a day. On top of that, about 10% of your phosphocreatine stores are inside of your brain. So creatine has huge impacts on cognitive health. There was actually a study out of the University of Sydney in Australia that had participants, one group taking creatine, the other group not supplementing with creatine, memorize long patterns of numbers. They found that the group who took creatine supplement, they also had a 21% increase in the amount of numbers that they could memorize. The people in this study were vegetarian, meaning they were most likely hyper responders, but that goes to show that creatine can really help with neurotransmitter synapses, which is the actual process your brain uses to fire off your neurons. If you choose to supplement with creatine and you want to do a loading phase, I would do a loading phase at 20 grams of creatine for 1 week and then backing off to 5 grams forever. If you are worried about bloating issues, introducing so much creatine into your system at once, do 5 grams every single day, and at the 1 month mark, you will have reached full saturation. Whenever you reach full saturation point with creatine inside your muscles, you cannot take any more. That's why backing down to that 5 gram maintenance for the rest of your life, or the duration that you choose to be on creatine for, will be best for results after that loading phase. There are some studies that show it is more better absorbed post-workout. So if there was a time to do it throughout the day, I would do it with any sort of post-workout isolate and post-workout carbs such as dextrose. Now that you've learned what creatine actually does within the body, you can start to supplement with creatine and continue to grow within the gym. If you have any questions for me, please reach out, drop a comment down below, or stop into S2 here in Normal, Illinois.